Okay, welcome to July, all about walking bass lines. And let me know, I saw a couple comments and maybe the sound is a little quiet. It looks like usual on this end, but let me know and I can always make some adjustments. It is hot as blazes here in Texas as well, so I feel you. Okay, so the schedule is a little flaky this month. We're meeting today, we're meeting next Wednesday, and then we're meeting the following Monday. I posted the schedule in the forum, hopefully with a little advance notice. Everybody can sort of dodge and weave and make it work. But I apologize for any inconvenience if you sort of cleared the decks for Thursdays. Just summer's weird. So there's a lot of comings and goings, and these were the best days to do it. Partly also tomorrow's the 4th of July, so if you're here in the States, like that's a thing. Anyway, we're going to get started with the fundamental version of Big Surly today. So I've got some exercises to go over, and then we'll look at the tune itself. And I can also do a bit of a preview for the embellished number 1, which we'll get into in earnest next week. But I can give you a bit of a heads up as to what's coming. The tune itself is a lot of work. Excuse me. Just working out the bass lines with the fingers is pretty challenging. So the handout is not as lengthy as it sometimes is. I think it's only 8 pages for this month, but it's an action-packed 8 pages. And there are some exercises to help you get to each next step of the arrangement. But the arrangement itself is a lot to work on, so I didn't want to overpack it with too much stuff. That said, I don't think we'll need the whole hour to go over everything today, so I'm happy to do questions and anything else that we need to get to once we've been through the material. So there is a version 1.1 that's already been posted. Should be on the same page as the original one, so if you want to go and get that, I just managed to fix a few typos thanks to Eric B. Appreciate the proofread. So the tune itself, let me just do a bit of an overview. It's a 16-bar tune, and the first 8 bars are based around this 1-bar bass line. Now, when you're doing this, you're really just doing steady bass. Like the thumb is just playing quarter notes, right? It's just that you're walking the bass up the low string. And even though it's a 1-bar idea, it's really a set of 2-bar phrases. Like that's one phrase. And then that's answered by and then another pickup phrase. Here's the 3rd phrase. And then the 4th phrase with the stop time. So let me pull up the handout and we'll start looking at, oh yeah, so anyway, but then the second part, I meant to mention this before I went to the PDF. So that's the A section, really 8 times through the bass line, but really 4 basic phrases. And then the B part is based around this 2-bar phrase, 4 to 5, and then 1. So really like one long, you could also think of it as like one long 4-bar phrase. Which basically repeats. So you get this whole 16 bar thing. You can think of that as just an A-B form. And that means that when we look at both the tune and the improvising, we're kind of going to break it up into the first 8 bars and the second 8 bars. So for instance, when we get to the improvising next month, we'll spend some time just looking at how to improvise over that E bass line, and then some time over how to improvise over the 4-5-1 chord progression. But to start with, we got to just get this going on. So we're going to start with some rudiments just for taking the walking bass and starting to add different things on top rhythmically and melodically. So we start off with just the bass, and we'll think of it as a 2-bar bass line. There it is. Now you can do some palm muting to get some distinction between the bass and the melody. When you're playing the bass line on its own, it makes the most sense to play open, index, middle, and ring with your fretting hand. But what finger you use for the bass notes is a little fluid because it depends on what you're trying to do on top at the same time. A general rule of thumb is that lower frets get a lower finger, right? If you think of this as 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you kind of match them up to first, second, third, and fourth fret, or first, second, or second, third, and fourth fret like this, then basically if you've got a higher note on top, you're going to use something closer to the pinky or the ring finger. If you got a lower bass note on the bottom, that'll be index or middle. And then, if you got you're going further up to the third or the fourth fret on the low end, it's probably going to be ring finger or pinky on the bottom and index or middle on top. Unless you have 2 notes at the same fret, in which case all bets are kind of off. So I'll try to talk about that a little bit as we go as well. But once we've got the bass line, the first thing to do is just put a downbeat on top, right? So just playing a pinch on beat 1. And that's just to get used to that coordination and to get used to moving the bass along once you've done that initial pinch. Now the next thing to do is to try putting a quarter note on every bass note in the first measure. So that would mean just doing a pinch on 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then repeating the bass on its own for a measure. So 2, 3, and oh, I blew it. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. And at the moment, I'm using my ring finger for the high string. And then let's try putting bass notes just on beats 1 and 2. Again, while continuing the bass line for the whole 2 measures. And then let's put the notes on 1 and 3. And continue the bass. Again. And then let's put the notes on 1 and 4. All right, so that's kind of a bunch of different places you can put quarter notes over that bass. Now let's try a little bit with eighth notes, so playing on 1 and. So we're going to have a pinch, play on the and of 1, and then the bass is going to continue on beats 2, 3, and 4 and into the next measure. So we'll have could try and put that on, you could have the downbeat, and then we could have eighth notes on 4 and, like this. So, whoops. 1, 2, 3, 4, and. Right? So just some basic things to get warmed up, to get used to playing that bass line, to get used to putting some open strings on top with some different rhythms. And then we can start to syncopate some of those eighth notes, right? So now we're just going to be playing on the and of 4 and the and of 1. So that sounds like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you got a pinch, bass note, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So at tempo, 1, 2, 3 and. And then we could just have some busier phrasing too. This is a rhythm that's related to one of the rhythms in the tune itself. So we would have 1 and 2, 3, 4 and. Right? If you just isolate the melody on top, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And if you just did it without moving the bass, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then as you put the bass in, now, you can take a rhythm like this, right, a rudiment like this, and you can start to apply fretted notes to it, right? So instead of playing this, if we just change this open high E string to G natural, we get this. This is where things start to get serious, right? So we're walking up with the bass like this. And then on beat 4, we've got G sharp in the bass, and we want this G natural on top. But we've played the bass first, 4, and then on the and, we grab the G natural on top. So the fingering rule says, well, okay, we're here with the third, with the ring finger on the 4th fret here. And so it's going to have to be one of these two fingers, right? Because this one's tied up and this one is in the wrong place. So we're going to reach back, and we're only going 1 fret lower. So the most sensible thing to do is probably the middle finger. But if that feels like too much of a stretch, you can use the index finger. The only reason I like the middle finger better is that it's more like in position for where you're going to be next, which is back to an open string. So, and also because your next bass note is going to be in it with the index finger. So if you can keep it to these two fingers, then the index finger is ready to go when you need it. So we'd have. And if this feels like a big stretch and you're feeling tension, I feel it back in here when I do it. Don't do this too much at one time. Don't do a lot of repetitions in a row because you'll start to hurt yourself and pull things. And also, really, as soon as you've played this bass note, you can kind of let go of it as you go to get the 3rd fret on the high string. It doesn't sound that much different. This is what it sounds like if I hold on to everything. And here it is if I don't. You can barely hear the difference. So you can always let go, you know, after you've played the bass note to go get the melody note that you need, or almost always, at least on this exercise you can. So the next version is to do the same kind of thing, but let's grab a D natural on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. So same idea. So this exercise here. So 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. Right? And so then we can also take something like this, a rudiment like this, or really, and we can put some notes on top, some fretted notes, right? So we could change this to, which means on top we're going to have Now, this is kind of an audio illusion because there are only 2 fretted notes on top. Those 2, because the lick is going. So it's almost all open strings. And when we play the first bass note, this fretted note, we only have 1 fretted note right now, right? Just the 3rd fret on the 2nd string. And then going to the open string. On the next beat, we do have to get 2nd fret on the 5th string, 6th string, and 2nd fret on the 1st string. So if we just move back with the middle finger, this is one of those cases where we have 2 notes on the same fret. So let's go with the middle finger here, playing the low string, ring finger playing the 2nd string. And then here we can slide up, middle finger goes up, and ring finger grabs the bass note at the end. So we're kind of coming back into position where this middle finger would be. And also because this ring finger is busy, it would be awkward to go here for the bass when we could just slide up. So, and then another open string on top, and ring finger gets the bass down here. So, altogether, that sounds like this. And we can use the same coordination to do this last lick here with notes on the high string. Up to beat 4, everything is basically the same idea. Middle and ring. And now here we want to get this C sharp on the 2nd string while we're getting G sharp in the bass. So ring fingers here, it's not a bad reach to get down here and get the C sharp with the index finger. That's about the right amount of stretch. Everything's kind of spread out, 1 finger per fret. So that gives us gives us that audio illusion of the bass is just kind of grooving away down here, and then somehow you got this melody on top. You can put these 2 licks together if you want to start practicing moving from lick to lick on the fly. So those are some exercises you can do to just start to get the left hand and the right hand going. I didn't write this out, but if you want a really ridiculous exercise to do, I just made a YouTube lesson about this, but I haven't finished it yet. But this is an exercise that my teacher gave me in high school to sort of wire in this idea of 1 finger per fret, which was to do this octave exercise. so that just gets you used to like, well, I'm on the second fret, it's my middle finger. Ooh, it's the first and the third fret, it's my index and my ring finger. Second and fourth, it's my middle and my pinky, right? So you just go through and do these octaves. The right hand is not so important because it's not like a speed thing, it's more like a coordination and memorization thing. And the rule is just octaves. And then use the quote-unquote right finger at the right time. So I get sore just working on this, so don't overdo it, right? You're going to feel stuff happening in through here, at least I do. So be careful with that, but it's a good one to do. Okay, let me pause for a second. I saw a couple of comments or questions, and then we'll get into the fundamental. Michael, when the note is in parentheses, it is not played but only sustained from the previous fretting, correct? That is correct, yes. So for instance here, it just means that you still hear the note, but you're not actually picking it again. Tab for the exercise. Yeah, let me see if I can bust that out. You know, Wes Montgomery did not play his octaves like that. He just played them. Just, you know, moving around like that. But but yeah, love some octaves, right? I mean, I think that we did some of this before for one of the vamps for one of the songs. We did some octaves like this, like a, you know, blues. And in the song from my new record called Oofy Walks In, there is a little breakdown. Which is built sort of out of that. Oh, was it Mississippi Ibis? Thanks, Julian. Yeah, okay. So you can go look for that. That was like summer of 2022, I think. And we did some octaves. So that should be in the Contemporary Blues archive. Okay, let me see if I missed any other questions. Let's see. This is sort of off topic, but yes, CD release show is on Saturday. And as of today, it does look like we will be able to live stream it. So I'll be sure and post about that. Let me see if there's any other questions. Mike, is the level okay now? Let me know. And okay, it doesn't look like there's any other musical questions. So on we go. Okay. Can't wait for the rest of the album. Well, you actually know some of the tunes because I recorded some tunes that we've done here. Like I included Mississippi Ibis and what else did I do? Ivory Ghost is on there. One of the blues in E. Which one? I'm blanking. I can play it, but I can't. Just spacing on which one it was. It wasn't Ramsey Avenue Swell. It was the other one. Yeah. So anyway, there's some tunes on there that we've done, and then there are a few new. Oh, Parisian Blues is on there, obviously, title cut. So yeah. So there should be some familiar things on there. Okay. Well, let's get into the tune. So there are three versions: fundamental, embellished number 1, and embellished number 2. Oh, Mule Shoe Getaway's on there too. Yeah, thanks. Again, if you look at the structure of the tune, the first 8 bars are built off of the walking bass on E. And then for the fundamental version, when we go to the second section, the 4-5-1 section, it's just steady bass for the 4 chord and the 5 chord. And then we walk on the 1 chord again. So here's what it sounds like, and then we'll sort of walk through it step by step. Again. Okay, so let's just walk through it. We'll go through the first section and then do the same thing for the second section. We'll just go through it sort of phrase by phrase, right? So this is a pickup phrase, 1 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So once you get to the downbeat, it's just like doing a rudiment, right? You're doing a pinch and then you're walking up. Now for the answer to that, sort of the conclusion of this 2-bar phrase, we're starting on just flat 7 on the top and bass in the bottom, do a pinch, go to the open string on the and keep the bass walking up. So this is really just like one of those exercises we did. So now here's a slightly busier lick, just like we looked at before. Okay, so this is the pickup into the next phrase. So you can really see these as being phrases that lead into the downbeat, right? Answered by, and then a longer. So if you want to look at the phrasing, we have a long resolution leading into the downbeat, and then we have this short response. And then we have another long resolution leading into this downbeat. And then we have this pickup into this even longer phrase that doesn't resolve till here. And then one more resolution like this. So into this downbeat with a short answer, into this downbeat. So into basically the downbeat of 1, into the downbeat of 3, a long delayed resolution into 5, basically, and then 7. So every other bar, basically all the odd bars. So let me do the time better. So 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. Right? So just like any other melody, it's really just a bunch of blues riffs, but if you can isolate the melody and just listen to it and learn how it sounds over the groove, like just over the beats, and start to really just hear it as a set of 4 phrases. Then you can start to get them into your head, and then putting them over the bass won't be quite as hard. But now that we've done that, let's look at what's going on as far as where they land. Let's leave out this little fill for a minute. And now this is like just pinches over the bass. Now this is a little tricky, right? Because we've got to get... But if we just use our rule of like, well, upper finger, lower finger, right? There's your C sharp right here. And then here comes your bass with an open high string, and then the C sharp again. You could hold this finger down here we are. Now that's just a series of moves. You could use your pinky or your ring finger. 2 notes only. Open string. Same little shape. G sharp and C sharp. And then stop time. So hooray, no bass at all. And notice that this same shape keeps coming up over and over. It's almost like just a chord you need to learn. And remember, like, chords take 3 notes, right? This is only 2 notes. So, in theory, it's easier than a chord. But, of course, learning any new shape and getting your hand to snap to it takes practice. So you might want to just work on getting this shape until you can make it happen, right? So one more time, here's what the whole section sounds like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Oh, sorry, that's not on the downbeat in this version. 1. And then we're into the B section. Okay, so questions about that, if you've got them. Is it wrong to swing the whole thing here too, especially the bass line? No, this actually this actually has a swing feel. So right, because if it was straight, it's definitely supposed to have a swing 8th feel, so don't worry about that at all. Okay, so now for the second section, in the fundamental version, we are going to just keep the bass as a steady bass on A and on B in measures 9 and 10 and measures 13 and 14. So for the bass, when we go through this line here, if we separate out the bass, we're just going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and then return to the walking bass line for 2 bars, which takes us back up to the last line. Again, just 4 times on A to B, and stop time on measure 16. So over that, we have these 2 blues licks. We have and so this first one has a pickup phrase starting at the end of measure 8. So you might want to just isolate that melody. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and that's all happening over this steady bass. So a pinch on 1 and a pinch on 2, a pinch on 3 and bass by itself on beat 4, and then here we have. So here's a B7 kind of lick with a very familiar looking rhythm. 1, 2, and 3, 4, and that's happening while we hold down this. Basically, if you hold down the bottom of a B7 chord with the root and the 3rd and the flat 7. So you almost don't have to play anything additional, just this pinky note at the first beat, and then the rest is just stuff that you're holding down. So 1, 2, and 3, 4, and then it's just back to the bass by itself. So it's like free. Here's that same shape that we have up here, and then we have up here. Oh, well, it's almost the same. And then we're back into this is a repeat down here, and you already know that. And then the bass, and then downbeat of 16 is a stop, and then we're back into the melody. And to Jim's point, yes, a brief bending of the G note. I didn't notate it because it sounds good either way, but if you're inclined to make that flat third into kind of a quarter tone bend towards the major third, but not actually getting there, because it's this note, right? Right, it's that flat third of the train whistle lick. And so if you want to do a bit of a bend that way, you can, and it'll sound pretty good. So the whole second section sounds like this. Walking in from measure 8, measure 9. Here comes the walk up again, and 4, and. And so here's the whole tune. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Sorry, it's syncopated in the embellished version. Couple questions. Same thing, bending on the D note on the B7. Yeah, sure, because that's the flat third of B, right? So if you can get the leverage. If I was gonna do that, I might hold down the root of the B with my index finger and then come in with the middle finger for the A. Just because for some reason that feels like you can get better leverage than if you're trying to hold down with the middle finger. I feel like I can get the bend executed better using the index and the pinky, or even index and ring, but I think pinky as opposed to middle and pinky, which feels hard, and I can't keep this note from bending at the same time. Barack, hey Barack, could you please go over the fingerings for bars 4, 5, and 6 again? Yeah, sure. 4, 5, and 6. Yes. So let's see. Okay. Just like I would sometimes use index, middle, and ring on 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, as opposed to 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Sometimes I would do like this. I would also sometimes use my pinky on the 3rd fret. Because it's just much less of a stretch between these guys to do this as opposed to this. Somehow, just the pinky just requires, going to the ring finger requires a lot more, you just got more you've got to do from here to here as opposed to from here to here. So, I would do open and pinky. Plus, you can also kind of bunch up your fingers if you want to get a little help pushing. And so I would have pinky, index and pinky, middle, and open, ring, and index. Index, middle, ring. And then pinky, second, middle, open. So like that. So hopefully that makes that clear. Let me know. Other questions? If not, I will just do a brief foreshadowing of the walking bass. If you want to get started with the walking bass for the embellished number 1, basically, we're going to do a halftime bass on the A chord. A for 2 beats, C sharp for 2 beats. And then on the B, we're going to walk down relative to the B. This is the root, flat 7, flat 6, and 5. So now, you could walk up the A chord like we walked up the E chord. Except that in embellished number 2, we've got these chords coming down, which we'll get to. And this is both difficult and terrible sounding. So it's better to just have more of a swing style, 2 beats per note kind of thing, which sounds better. When you're improvising, there is an option to walk the bass like this, which we can talk about. But then for the B chord, we're going down like that. And so we're just going to start by putting that melody over this bass line, right? So just jump ahead down here to line 3, and we would have, let's just look at what it looks like in the actual, and here's embellished number 1, right? And so, as opposed to, so it's just a fingering problem. Here's our old friend, ring and index. Really not that big a deal if you're already playing on the E chord. And then this is the B with the descending bass. Here's the same lick. But just look how many open strings there are. So here's a pinch between index and pinky. But now open strings, we just need to get this A note with the ring finger. Or maybe the... I'm trying to think what the best fingering would be. If you go like this, index and pinky, open, middle, you can get the bass with the ring finger, open high string, or maybe index finger here. Both are, viable, right? So we'll go over these exercises in more detail next time, just to kind of walk through all of that. But these are some rudiments you can check out for working out the walking bass, starting with just the bass, and then adding in some quarter notes on top, and then adding in some fretted notes on top, and then doing some eighth notes. This is just, some exercises. It's kind of like the octave exercise, just like it's a hard thing to do. Just to, if you can do that, then you'll be able to play the melody, no problem. It's like swinging with two bats would be the baseball analogy for those of you who watch baseball. If you don't, then that may not make any sense. But the idea is make it harder than it needs to be when you're practicing, and then when you go to do the actual thing, it doesn't seem so terrible. So that's, I would say, what we're going to do in the subsequent versions is syncopate some of the melody notes, right? And so, I guess I should point this out. One of the things just to keep a heads up for is that in the embellished version, this note here now, and we already did some rudiments around that particular syncopation, right? But instead of just playing, we've got right on the and of 4. So I would take a look at that, maybe watch the slow version that I shot. That's kind of a tricky syncopation that's going to be coming up. Question. How about playing the full B7 sharp 9 in beat 1 of bar 10? Sounds nice. Yeah, it definitely does. Absolutely. That would sound great. The embellished number 2 has like this tricky triplet thing. And I would definitely, if I was just playing through things myself, probably would at least include the 3rd string on the 2nd string. I knew someone was going to ask this. Delphine, this is good. Can you explain how to choose valid notes for the bass, especially for the B7 chord in embellished number 1? Yeah. So definitely, if you were thinking of this as like, this B7 as having like a Mixolydian sound, the bass, or if you were thinking of just being the 5 chord of E, you would think that the bass would go root, flat 7, major 6, 5, and then home to the root. That's thinking first in terms of B. This is the root of B, the flat 7 of B, the major 6, and the 5 of B, and then we go back to E. But for some reason, in the bluesier, there are 2 reasons. I tried it both ways. And there are 2 reasons that 3, that the G sounds better than the G sharp. One is there's that sort of classical music thing where, like, if you think about the harmonic minor scale, you have flat 6 and flat 7 going up. But when you're going up, you have in the melodic minor scale, you have natural 6 and major 6 and major 7 going up. But when you're coming down, to make sure that it's minor, you have flat 7, flat 6, and 5. So since we're descending from this B7, it sounds more like a descending bass line, or it sounds more like it's headed towards E if you flat the 6. That sounds too bright to me. So the second justification is, well, we're playing a blues in E basically, and what's bluesier than flat 3? So we're really passing through flat 3 to get to the root. So that's the second justification. And the third justification is we're putting a sharp 9 on top. And so sharp 9 is an altered sound, so this is kind of now a B7 altered. That kind of thing. And so it would sound weird in that context to have what amounts to a major or natural 13 on top in the bass. I mean, it's not really a 13 because it's all the way at the bottom, but it would be functioning like that in the chord. It sounds better to have basically the musical equivalent of flat 13 in the bass to kind of reinforce that funky altered sound that we got on the chord itself. So there are 3 big fat rationalizations for doing the bass like that. As far as where the bass lines come from in the first place, excuse me, on the E chord, you're basically going up the scale and you're passing through So basically, there's this hierarchy, right? Chord tones, followed by filling those in with scale tones. And then the scale tones can get filled in with half steps or chromatic steps. So what we're doing here is we're thinking, okay, we're trying to, the bass is trying to, the role of the bass is to explain both the rhythm and the harmony of what's going on. So we could have something like that, root and third. We could then fill in, those are chord tones, right? So we could fill them in with scale steps. And then we could fill in the scale steps with the chromatic passing tone, which also happens to be the sound of flat third to third, which is also a really strong sound in the blues. So the idea is to get 4 different notes. And so that's how we get that line. Now, there are other bass lines you could do, right? Just root, third, fifth, and sixth. Let's see, what's our melody? Like that. Or, I don't know, right? Something more like that. Root 6, 5, 6. That's like the Honey Dripper, right? The version by Jack McDuff. So on, right? So there's different things you could do. On the 4 chord, we're just playing root and third, but we could walk it up the same way. Root, 2, flat 3, 3. And B, also, like if it was more convenient to do so, we could go like that. But it's kind of a hassle and it gets in the way of the melody. But it can be done, and I do like doing that walk up. I mean, one of my favorite things to do is a turnaround that does like, right, so. Sort of thing. So I hope that helps. It's not random. I mean, it's governed by rules, just like, the way you'd have to put together like classical counterpoint to some extent. It's just simpler because we're not trying to do, there's a lot of repetition, right? Because it's more of a groove-oriented music. Monty. When you composed the tune, what was your process? Did you commit to a song structure first, then bass, then melodies, or was the actual process more convoluted than that? I actually made this one up kind of really just sort of, well, the first section was just like, well, I want this bass line, and I'm going to put some riffs on top of it. I was just trying to come up with a good demonstration of like, well, what does walking bass look like and do, right? So I had just this vamp, basically, almost. And just trying to put different things on top of it, which is something that I will sit around and practice. Especially when I was just starting, I mean, it still takes practice to do anything new and different, right? But there was a period where I would just kind of sit and be like, okay, like if I just, you know, just keep this bass going, and then what can I do on top? But for this tune in particular, I tried to kind of slant it so that there was the most activity was happening in the melody when there was the least to hold down in the bass, right? So trying to make it busier when there's an open E string, say. But the idea was like, I just worked out like what, you know, sort of a set of phrases for the first section. And then I was like, well, it's got to go somewhere. Where can it go? And I always like these chords. So the idea was, oh yeah, okay, we can go to 4. That's a little different than going to 5 right away. Or then here's the 5 chord. There's the descending bass. And it sounds like we're not done yet. Let's repeat it. So the first impulse was walking bass line in E, repeated bass line. The second was, can I make it sound like a song as opposed to just like just like an improvisation, right? So building a little bit of phrasing, and the phrases are related to each other. You know, they're not completely dissimilar. So having a set of phrases, and then doing the stop time, that was one of the last things I did once I had the whole tune together, was to go, oh, let's really accentuate the shift from the first section to the second section. And then the second section was really just that impulse of like, we've been on E, where can we go, and how can we change it up? And I like coming up with tunes that are not necessarily in a 12-bar form, or even necessarily like an AABA 32-bar. Like, I like the idea of a 16-bar tune because it still feels basically like it's a blues, but it's a little bit surprising also. So it was those different things coming together. And that's pretty much where it came from. I hope that kind of answers the question. Oh, good. Delphine, glad those explanations made sense. Okay. If there's another question, I will take it, but that's basically what I came here to talk about. And so next week we will look at more exercises. We will look at the embellished number 1, and then we'll kind of just, I'll just do the same thing. I'll kind of just preview a little bit about the embellished number 2. And then in the final week that we have, we'll look at the complete embellished number 2 and the vamp. But there's short videos of everything already. There's an updated version 1.1 of the PDF, so you should have plenty to work on. Just one other heads up about summer scheduling, which is that I'm going to try to work it out to do at least one live stream, but I think between my Rocky Mountain Guitar Camp commitment and a couple other things, the material in August for improvising on this tune may be a series of pre-recorded sessions. There'll still be a PDF and there'll still be like in-depth video, but I may not be able to like be in the studio to do live streaming. So I just want to give everybody a heads up about that might be coming. But I've done it once or twice before where I had to sort of pre-record everything. And so I'll do my best to make sure it's as detailed as possible so you still feel like you're getting everything you need to know to do the improvising. Okay, thanks for being here, everybody. I will see you next Wednesday.